This is Show Up as a Leader, a show from PeopleForward Network, helping you maximize your positive impact on the world by becoming your best, fully authentic self.
Hey everyone, it's Rosie. I am so deeply excited and honored to have back as a repeat guest my dear friend, the incredible Jen Marr. Had her on a couple years ago. You're going to want to listen for that previous episode, but she is all about doing the work of human care and connection in a very tangible way. And she is the CEO and founder of a company called Showing Up. And Jen is releasing her latest book, Lifting Up, The Transformative Power of Supportive Leadership, launches May 27th, 2025. And we dig in and talk a little bit about her first book, Showing Up, and where all this work came from, why it is so critical that we have these human skills today and very tangible things that even non-touchy-feely people and non-touchy-feely industries, what are very tactical, tangible things leaders can do to help employees feel seen, to help bridge generational divides. You're going to want to listen for her talking about the 580s that are behind all of this work. You're going to want to listen for her talking about the 210 rule. And you're going to want to listen all the way till the end, because when she says what is the one challenge or behavior that she would encourage all leaders to do, it is so simple and so powerful. But if we all started doing this in our teams, in our organizations, we would just have far better engagement, far better results. I just love every opportunity I get to spend with Jen. Her work is absolutely amazing. We have personally been bringing it into some of our clients as an additive to what we do and a key part of strategy. In this world of disruption and this world of civil unrest, in this world of AI, like these human skills are needed now more than ever. And so I just think you're going to get a ton out of this conversation, and make sure you go out and buy her latest book, Lifting Up, and let us know what you think and how you're leveraging it to level up your leadership skills. Jen, I am so excited to have you back on the show. Your new book is coming out. We're going to talk all about that. But our connection started with you being on the show, like a year and a half ago. And your work is so amazing. I've got more involved with it. You have new stuff coming out. It's just, I'm just, yay! We get to have time together.
Well, you had me at Show Up as a leader, Rosie Ward. And from the name till the greeting till the last few years' journey, it's such an honor to be here. I love collaborating with you, love everything you're doing. Yeah, I can't wait for this conversation.
Yeah, me too. Likewise. Well, to give, we're going to get into this work, but to give the audience a little bit of backstory, if you will. So your work is all about showing up and teaching the very tangible skills of human care and connection. And I will say that since we had our last conversation, and we'll link the previous one because people should go listen to it. Not that they have to tee this up, but I think it goes really well. But it synergistically worked out that last summer, one of our clients was coming into town, into Minneapolis. You also were coming into town in Minneapolis. And you're like, is there anything we could do? I'm like, wait, hey, we've been trying to talk about your work with them. Let's do it. And I just want to say for everyone listening, to tee all this up, I don't care what your industry is, and I don't care what gender your organization is made up of. This was an organization that's predominantly male, predominantly older, and very, very blue collar, not an industry that is touchy-feely by any means, right? And they ate it up and could not stop talking about how critical this is, because we're talking about human skills. And in a world of technology, in a world of AI, in a world of disruption, human-centric skills, read McKinsey, read Korn Ferry, all of the reports keep reinforcing that human skills, not that they weren't always important, but are becoming more and more and more critical. And so with that, I just want to say, here you go. I've seen it firsthand, everybody. So what are the biggest challenges that leaders are facing moving forward? And why are these human skills so critical?
Oh, it's such a great, we could talk just on that one question.
I know.
Well, that session that we had together was awesome. And I loved collaborating with you on that. That was great. And from there, we went into our organization's summer summit, where I asked you to speak, and you did. And you introduced me to the term VUCA. And You are now quoted in the book on introducing me to VUCA, so the great Rosie Ward
Yay.
and gives your own view of VUCA. But I think going into the complexities of this world and really what is VUCA: volatility, uncertain, complexity, and ambiguity. And these things that are all coming together to create unstable environments. Nothing is predictable anymore. Nothing is consistent anymore. Up until, really the rampant use of technology, we had a pretty stable, systemic way of working. And that has completely changed. So on top of just, take Starbucks as an example, went from a local community coffee house to now mostly a mobile pickup order place. And behind those changes, with every new technology launch, with every new marketing campaign, with every new shift in customer dynamics, you have a workforce that has to deal with that. And technology and all of these shifts and changes and layoffs and reorgs, the uncertainty of it all makes people uncertain. And that's very, very hard to lead. So you take just the complexity of the work environment as step number one. Then you have the generational differences, because we now have a generation that was raised on technology and the people leading them weren't. And the people leading them can't just automatically think, hey, suck it up, I had to deal with this, because we don't know what it's like to be them. And in my book, I really share the journey of my daughter, Audrey, because my youngest daughter was the first to get one of these. Her two older sisters still had a phone. So this generation just coming into the workplace, I think there's a significant shift even between this latest group and the palpable difference of youth that had to learn to make friends on a screen versus my older two daughters who still had made their friends before social media came out. And that generation is just graduating college now, maybe 1 year into the workplace. But this generation now that has such low social skills and aren't confident in networking, want to stay more behind the scenes on a screen, don't want to lead as much anymore. Look at spontaneous conversations as being scary and anxiety ridden. And you're being led by a workforce or leaders that have been raised with human interaction. So you take those two and you add everything together, and the fallout from this between generational differences and all of this, we have an incivility crisis, right? People's emotional bandwidth is so short now. You have meltdowns on airplanes. You've got people yelling at customer service agents. So our own emotional capacity, our own social skills are crumbling. And all of this takes a hit in the workplace. And what is the common denominator? What is actually going to pull us through all of this? Like you said, human connection. That human connection that has the ability to deal with all of these challenges. Because when you look at all these challenges, they all underscore the loneliness, the isolation, the fear, the anxiety, the exhaustion, the burnout. And managing all of that are skills that people never have had. And so you can't take the old transactional workplace model and put it into a model now where we have to be able to know how to nurture and grow this generation, to be able to make adaptable, collaborative teams. And if we don't have a leadership that knows how to do that and knows the boundaries of doing all of that, we're not going to make progress. So that's why I wrote the book.
It's like we could have a whole conversation on this today, but I think it's so critical because one of the things, when you and I met, I said, oh, this is like a missing piece of the work that we do, or it's such a big part of the puzzle piece. And what's interesting is with that same client that you came and we were working with their culture ambassadors last fall, we brought together a group of their leaders that run like in a regional capacity, and they're a key role within that organization. And it was just starting to introduce them to, the generational differences. And I love the term, we talk about this in our upcoming book too, where the divide is really native digital versus native analog, because that's really the critical difference. And we started to just have a brief conversation around that, because in our culture survey, we actually pull out millennials and Gen Zs because what we know they need from a different work standpoint. And we look at the data, and what we've seen is while they've done well in other areas with that group, they've been increasingly going in the wrong direction. And if people aren't looking at that to say like this group needs something different, and most of their leaders are Gen X and above, maybe older millennials. So there's a different mindset mentality around work. And there was so much judgment. Well, like, well, they just don't want to work. And why would I do this? And I'm looking at, do I hire someone with 20 years experience, whatever, but this person's not going to be here. And I sat in this room of 20 of them and listened to the amount of just judgment and labeling. And I don't need, and I'm going to retire in 3 or 4 years. And I just thought, they're not bad people. This is just their humanness of like, it is uncomfortable to unlearn and relearn leadership in this day and age. And like, why should I have to, right? I had to suck it up. They're fragile, like all of this crap. And then here's the thing is then we humanized it. And I like told the story of my son. And when they started to realize, I'm like, how many of you have kids? Then all of a sudden it hit home. And they went from judging to going, oh crap, I don't know how to do that. They don't even have one-on-ones with their people because they don't want to get too touchy-feely. Like this is a very like, and so so this is just me kind of like double clicking, speaking of technology, on what you just said, Jen, because we're seeing it firsthand. And as we just even start to have these conversations with our clients and where we integrate your critical work in with what we're already doing. And they're like, oh my gosh, because we're like, you have to unlearn and relearn. Like I was dealing with a client this morning who they got a directive from their board that they have to fundamentally, all of their executives have to level up and lead differently. And it's creating anxiety for them to get to where they want to go in this environment. And so we're doing all the inner work with them to help them move past their faulty programming, et cetera. And where yours come in, and then they don't know how to lead other people, right? And they're all struggling and they're dealing with aging parents and they're dealing with, all this stuff. And so I think that long-winded answer is critical because what I see is people are standing in judgment of one another rather than, like you said, I don't know what it's like to be them and they don't know what it's like to be me, but it is easier for us to stand in judgment of people than it is to have to look in the mirror and do the cringy work to perhaps unlearn and relearn things that are familiar and comfortable to us.
Very well said. Well, you get this so deeply, Rosie, which is why this is such a great conversation. All those things are true. And I love how you're creating that foundational self-awareness work of, getting unstuck. But then on top of that, you need the tangible skills so that you're confident to deal with this, because when there's no confidence, there's uncertainty, and then uncertainty always results in lack of action.
Yeah. So so your first book is Showing Up, and that is really for anybody and looking at how do we teach those skills of human care connection. So let's just talk about that briefly. And then this will lead into Lifting Up and kind of how they go together and where this fits into this messiness of people don't know how to interact, don't know how to deal with it.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I never set out to write Showing Up. And then when I wrote Showing Up, I never set out to write this book. So sometimes life just kind of
the universe is just saying, Jen, we need you. Here we go.
And you're led into these different areas, right? So Showing Up was really, was born out of a lot of crisis response work and the realization that in our changing world was not at all introduced to VUCA at the time. We are not good at knowing how to care for each other and support each other. I was spending a lot of time in the aftermath of crisis and noticed how even though people had really good emotions of care, a lot of empathy, a lot of compassion, they weren't applying those emotions in a way that was supportive and helpful for the people that were struggling the most. And in fact, even just focused on emotion-based training, EQ in those situations isn't helpful because the correct emotions were already there. What wasn't there is training how to work against the opposing emotions. So I might really care, but I don't know if it's time. I don't know if it's the right. I don't want to make it worse. I'm not quite sure what to say. There's a lot of doubting behaviors. Or on the opposite side, not driven out of fear is more driven out of denial. And we call that whole area the deflectors, which are like, well, I got my own problems. Someone else is better handle that than you. Send them to HR, or, I can't take that on. So we have all of those barriers and emotions that stop us from caring, even with EQ training, right? Because self-awareness doesn't still give you the capacity. You can't be compassionate by someone. You can't be empathy by someone because nouns don't act. Emotion, you have to know the actions to take. So that first book was, if we're getting the actions wrong, then let's learn the skills. And I went through a lot of research. I did research studies in which we took the most combative and difficult age group, 6th grade boys, and literally just gave them the actions. We need you to do this week in, week out. And over the course of 12 lessons or 8 lessons, they cultivated those emotions. They were changed. They knew what to do. They had confidence. They could really reach out. And it was kind of a really great groundbreaking study. So we knew we were onto something. It led to the book. And the basis of the book then is, how do we make sure that we leave people feeling cared for when we interact with them? It's the core foundational human behavior skills, and diving into an action-based strategy versus an emotion-based strategy, and making sure that there are clear pragmatic steps that you can take. Because as we found in the research study, some people might be having the worst day of their life. They may never be able to tap into empathy and compassion. They still need to know what to do. And if they do those things, it will actually cultivate the better emotions. So showing up is much more of a peer-to-peer book. It much more is based on presence, right? We know active listening is important, so that's in there. But how do we actually look? How do we know when we talk or we don't talk? How do we know when writing something is better or doing an action is better than actually saying something? And what are good phrases we should say and can say, and what are phrases we should avoid?
Like, let me know if you need anything, or like that one. Like, it's so funny. And I've been so guilty of that. And then I stop and I think, and I'm like, when someone's done that to me, and I'm like, ugh. It's like, I know they mean well, but I'm like, I don't even have the energy to say like, and I get into my hyper productive. I got my own shit going on, the deflector. And so I will say, what I so appreciate about the showing up work is it got me like really being intentional about the people in my life, and just reaching out. And it could be like, hey, how's your mom? How's this doing? When I have, a sister going through something, how can I support you today? Like the language that actually what's in your head, but when it comes out in a clumsy way, not malintended, the person actually does feel less supported. And so it's been a game changer for me. I just have to say, of changing how I show up for people, and just like, no, this is just what you do. And I feel like my relationships in my life have strengthened because of it. So I just have to say thank you for that, because I get in my own way and I'm like, I love these people in my life, but I'm so busy. I'm like, God. And then when I have stuff going on, I'm like, where are people checking in on me? Dang.
Right.
Anyway, I just have to share that it matters hugely. And I always think about the Pitbull song of everybody's going through something, but they are, and we don't know it. And I go back to my client example of, well, it's none of my business. I don't want to know. I don't want to ask those questions. That's opening up a can of worms. I don't know what to say. And it's very, very real. And I think it happens in our life, but that's why I love your next book, the book that's coming out, is it's really about the workplace, because we spend so much time at work. And if you have a leader that doesn't meet with you, that doesn't ask, that doesn't want to know, you feel about this big. So people like, like you feel like you're, a millimeter tall, and it violates that core human need of feeling like we are seen and matter. So I've seen it firsthand over and over and over. So I just have to say, like, your work is so impactful. And again, if we can take non-touchy-feely people in industries and teach them the skills versus the emotion, like, that's so critical, because we need tangible skills.
Amen. Say it louder, Rosie.
Yeah, we need tangible skills. Well, and so let's talk about it, because speaking about the skills, one of my biggest pet peeves is when people refer to these human-centric, human care, human skills as soft skills. Although most people don't know that it actually comes from the military. Like, they actually delineated because from hard skills and soft skills, because hard skills was like artillery, machine-based training, like how to use the equipment. And so they needed another way to talk about like communication and strategy or whatever. So soft skills really aren't soft. Like, people think about them as weak. So anyway, we need to call them power skills or essential skills, and realize that soft wasn't meant because they were less than. It was the military trying to delineate between artillery training versus whatever. But that being said, let's talk about why we need to teach those skills and what those look like in the workplace. So this is getting into your new book now, Lifting Up.
I loved what you said before. You're talking about, we end up not acting on how we intend to, right? So when we talk about that awkward zone, I love to frame it as our intent versus our impact, right? I think, as we found, so let me segue from going from showing up to lifting up, a couple things. So in showing up, we train skills like the pause filter, right? The pause filter is an acronym for P, pause, stay present, right? Be emotionally available. A, don't give advice if you're not asked. U, don't unload your own problems. S, stay with the mood of the person. E, keep the emphasis on them. So that's a beautiful framework that encompasses showing up, how to have a conversation that you'll leave someone feeling heard. And that really encompasses showing up. As we took this work out and we knew that we needed to grow that, you get into organizations and especially leadership that will say, well, I need more than that. I need to know how to have the conversations. I need to know I'm being asked for advice and how do I guide that forward. And so way back when we really started, as you know, we survey anonymously the organizations we work with, and we gather a lot of information out of that. And what we really narrowed in on are what we would call the 580s, right? And give or take 15 points, but in any organization, but it's usually within 15 points of 80%, either direction. 80% of people, usually much higher, 90, 100% of people will consider themselves good people. So most people will say, I'm a compassionate person. Most people will say, I have empathy. So sometimes when we hear empathy is the most important skill or compassion, leadership's important, it kind of doesn't ring true to people because they're like, I'm already that way. So 80% of people consider themselves a good person. That's good. We are good people. Huh? But yet we flip that, and 80% of people in organizations today will say, but I don't really feel seen in my struggle. I'm dealing with a lot and nobody has any idea what I'm going through. So 80% I can see you, compassionate person, but 80% that nobody really sees me. So that's what gets set up. And on top of that, we ask, well, do you share it? No.
Of course not.
Well, of course not, right? Of course, that's why I'm not feeling seen. I'm not going to share it. But then we ask the critical question, do you wish you could? Because it would be one thing in the old work model of leave it at the door, Rosie, work is work and home is home. If that model stood true, we would have 80% of the people saying, no, I don't need to talk about it at work. Like I'm separating the two. But 80% want to and need to and feel like their productivity is suffering because they're hiding something. And then the last 80% is just, how do I manage that? Like what are the boundaries? It's very, very different. I don't know how to do that. So those 580s really drove our research and our work in piloting workplace innovations in the form of leadership, in generating new leaders and workplaces that can break through those 580s, right? Because if we can get people saying, yeah, I'm compassionate, and you know what, I walk into work and I'm good. Everybody, my manager knows what I'm dealing with and I let him know everything. It's so good to be able to talk to him and he confidently manages what I'm working with. If we can create workplaces like that, it will solve for every other issue that's out there right now, truly. Like you call them soft skills, you call them power skills, Sometimes I hear them called human skills because human skills kind of goes against all the technology skills that are just being dumped on us that really create a lot of tension and complexity and uncertainty out there. So we need some stability in just our humanness to be able to interact with each other and feel safe around each other and have trust amongst each other. And that's the challenge of our time. And that's why I wrote the book.
Well, I love that. And I'm thinking about more than one leader at our various clients. But like when we start to talk about this work, that'll say something like, well, I don't want them on low, or they'll again, standing in judgment, they will talk about, well, they overshare and they bring in stuff that is none of my business to know, or I don't want to know that stuff. So what do you say to the leaders that have that judgment and are sitting in that space of they overshare, I don't care, I don't want to know because I don't know what to do with it. It's none of my business. And so I'm just either going to not have one-on-ones, or I'm going to keep it very tactical, or I'm not going to ask the questions because it's the fill in the blank.
There you go. Case study as to why this book is needed, right? Like just take that, and we can unpack it. Number one, to be very clear from the start, and you know this, leaders should never, ever pry. ever. If somebody doesn't want to share something, it never needs to be that way, right? So that has to come across, number one. Number two, we know that if people are struggling with something, we know it's impacting their performance. We know it's impacting their showing up on time, they're doing their best work, they're being able to collaborate with other people and being innovative. If people are challenged with something at work and they need to talk about it, but they can't, that is going to be your least loyal employee. And that is happening more and more. It didn't used to be that way, of course, but in everything we just talked about, generational differences, VUCA, incivility, all these things that are happening now, there is a greater need. And just we're always on screens. And when we're always on screens, we're less confident around people. So it's almost like we have to create the environments where we are required to be face-to-face. So back to your leader, basically what we would say in that situation is you start very pragmatically, just making sure that you're supporting that person the best that you can. Start with the question every day. Hey, Rosie, what do you need? What can I do to support you better in your job? One question a day. If we started there, it starts with just showing interest in a person, basic human validation and acknowledgement. And I, as your leader, am responsible to pull the best out of you. So one of the most simplistic things you can start with is the, I call it the 2-10 rule. And the first 10 is, if you're ever within 10 feet of anyone or on a screen, between 10 inches of anyone, smile and say their name, acknowledge them. We've got people that are with their phones all the time and we forget it's so simple, but people don't do it. And then if you see someone and don't acknowledge them, they're like, they don't even care about me. So it starts with that super simple validation. Just smile at your employees and use their name. And secondly, the second 10 is the 10 on the head. Just imagine that you are looking at them, that they have the capacity to be the 10 out of 10 employee. And you see the potential and you see the belief. And what happens in our workplaces now is they're so short, their fuses are short, they're frustrated with everything. And if somebody sent an email that didn't hit right or something like that, you look at people in judgment. And when you look at people in judgment and you interact with them, they feel it. You feel it. And so some of these it's almost like, Rosie, going back to Relationships 101, and that is part of the book, that this is not touchy-feely stuff. This is just basic human manners. And if leaders aren't going to model that, then what hope do we have? Which is why I wrote this book, because if anyone can pull us out of this mess, it's leaders. And it's all going to start with these human power skills. And they aren't soft and fuzzy and whatever. They're sometimes more and more awkward and difficult and nuanced and challenging and complex. But when we get them right, it's where the magic happens, right? Or the sparkles, you would say.
Well, yeah, it's a sparkle. Well, it's 100%. And I think even just changing some things, like I've even talked about, like, rather than saying like, how can I help you today? And this gets in a whole other topic, but like, there's a difference of helping versus fixing versus serving. And just like, well-intended, like, let me know if you need anything. When we ask someone, how can I help you? It's actually conveying that they're weak or they're less than. And obviously we wouldn't say, how can I fix you? But helping and fixing come from a deficit place. But when we say, how can I be of service or how can I support you? It feels more like we're in it together, so to speak. And so even changing language of, how can I be supportive of you today? What can I do to support you today? That language is powerful. And we've been using that on our team. We do these daily check-ins. And I will say, even on a screen, you can tell in someone's face, like, something's not right. Right. And so checking like, hey, are you okay? Is there anything I can support you? Seemed off or whatnot. And just those simple, and again, it's up to them what they do or don't share. But I think that that's super, super powerful. And the other thing that you said, Jen, that I think is important is, even if you ask that, I think some of the fear of doing that is, well, what if they unload, all this stuff? What am I supposed to do with that? Just listen. Like, you don't have to solve, you don't have to fix. It might just be, do you need some time? Do you need the day off? Do we need to, whatever, refer you to employee assistance program? But leaders are afraid to ask the question, especially if they grew up in the suck it up, get it done, leave work at, leave home at home, they're having a really hard time grasping that leading that way doesn't cut it anymore.
Yeah. And I will take that a little farther because you can open a can of worms when you do ask, right? Which is why you leaders have to be equipped to know how to manage that. They have to know. And so part of what we have in the supportive, or not supportive, lifting up the supportive leader book is exactly how to have those conversations. And many times, when we work with organizations, we partner with the HR department to actually have this framework together. What we want to be able to do is have the manager as the front line instead of HR, because the old model was if you had an employee that was having an issue, go see HR. That's what they're for. And now the way that we want to frame it is let the leader take that first spot. Because as you pointed out, many times, a great percentage of the time, just listening will solve the issue. But a decent chunk of time, there's going to be an issue that you're not quite sure how to react to, right? You're going to hear something you're not 100% sure. There are confidentiality things that have to be taken into account. Every company has, different policies based on that. And so we have to be able to let the leader confidently know how to have that first conversation. And that first conversation should never be anything other than fact-finding, and then quickly following up. But between that is, how do I best support this employee? So you hear it out, and then we have this support mapping phase where we have to understand from a leader's perspective, there's 3 areas, right? Number 1, how can I act as a mentor? Is there someone this person should know that I know? What can I do as a mentor? Secondly, what can I do as a connector? And that leader should have a full kind of grasp of what's available in the company. Hey, we've got these employee resource groups, or, we have this financial wellness program, or I'm going to send you off to, I'm going to introduce you to this person who can talk about college counseling or whatever. That's connecting to resources. And then the third is, what's my role as a leader? How often should I be following up? So it positions the leader then to have the confidence to have that follow-up conversation and just say, hey, I heard you. This is what we talked about. This is my idea. I'm going to introduce you to that. I want you to reach out to this person, blah, 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 blah. And then it sets it up for just very frequent, fast check-in conversations. How did that go? What did you do? And it's not putting the leader in the spot of fixing anything, but helping equip and guide that employee forward. So that's what I think is when we talk about human skills, and especially going into those messy personal spots, they are difficult and nuanced. And so that's really where our specialty is. And I love the meat of that. I love to dive into that. I love to make leaders confident in how they can handle it, because it saves so much time. And it makes a much more connected, collaborative workforce.
Well, I love all of that. And I think, there's multiple things that are coming to mind, because I think people who are listening might think, okay, this is like if my employees are in crisis or dealing with something. Well, first of all, note everybody has, back to my pitbull, everyone's going through something that you may or may not know about. And it doesn't have to be like crisis level, but it could be stress level about finances at home, or a home repair, or something with their kid. But those stresses add up because they're human beings, to your point. And I think one of the things we've learned with one of our clients, that they had a rough safety year last year, and there's a lot going on. People are distracted, people are whatnot. And so if you're not just checking in like, hey, how's today? Like, we use like above and below the line, really simple. Like, are you even above the line? You don't even have to get into why you're below the line. It's like, hey, you're having a below the line day. Is there anything we can do to support you? Do we need to maybe move some people around? Because we know if you're below the line, you're probably not as focused, not concentrating as well, and your risk of injury potentially goes up. And so, there's ways to just very, very simply, like, just building it into the cultural practice. But the other thing that when you talk about like mentoring and stuff, it also could just be that this person maybe is feeling stagnant in their career. Or again, we know that the younger generations, it's not that they necessarily want to leave the organizations and they're not loyal. They're wanting more mobility and growth. And so they could be feeling frustrated. Well, if you never meet with them and don't ever take an active interest in what they're wanting to learn and grow in, where they might be challenged, where they might feel stuck or stagnant, and they don't feel heard, or they have ideas about the company and no one listens, even if they're unrealistic ideas, if they're always being shut down, like, that's a missed opportunity. And so I love that you're given very tactical. It's almost like, how do you have effective one-on-one conversations, and how do you have developmental conversations in a way that also cares for the humanness? Because I think it's so basic, but Jen, I can't tell you like how many of our clients that I am boggled, my mind is boggled of either they're not having one-on-ones or when they are. And I talk about, what do you talk about? It's literally just a run through of it's like a status update. There's no like, how are you doing? There's no giving and receiving feedback of each other. It's like, well, we missed that because that's the uncomfortable. We just jump to, here's a status of boom, 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 boom. Great. Anything else? Nope. That's their idea of a one-on-one. And I'm like, oh, you're missing developmental opportunities, engageable moments. You're missing catching stuff early. I mean, there's just, yeah. So I could go on and on, but love
I
it.
think, chapter 7 in my book is about culture building. And, I love to tap into the work of great people. And two of the people that I really have tapped into for chapter 7 first would be Zach Mercurio, who is an expert on mattering. And he has a new book out now, and I just love to work and talk to him. But he will go back to the foundation of everything is someone feeling like they matter. And so the bottom layer of the culture pyramid that I say is kind of 3 building blocks would be mattering, dignity, and respect. If someone doesn't feel like they matter, that they add value, that they're valued, if they don't feel respected by the organization, they're not going to be a productive employee. So that bottom layer, in order for that to happen, people need to be heard and understood. People have to know what's all going on. And that's what builds trust. If we don't have those basic human needs, that leader's not going to be trusted, because it's like needing water. You want someone to understand how you tick, and a leader needs to be with people in what they're dealing with. So that's the first layer. If we have mattering, dignity, and respect, the layer on top of that goes to deeper relationship building. That's really where we can start to grow a community. That's when we can have a deeper sense of belonging. That's when we can really get collaborative and support each other. Now, when those 2 layers are in place, then we can go out and have people train on resilience and do positive psychology and have growth, because those 2 layers are kind of like the wings beneath us, right? And I think what happens in too many organizations today, and the other expert that I love to lean on in chapter 7 is Dr. Matthew Lee, who's the founder of the Flourishing Group at Harvard University, and he's really studying the science of flourishing. And in order for anyone to flourish, I can't flourish, Rosie, if you're not. So sometimes the science of well-being and wellness in organizations today is a very one-sided thing. And so I can go and do all of the things to make me happy, but if it's not benefiting my family, that's not good. I can have a high sense of well-being, but maybe my family doesn't. Flourishing is when everyone around you is valued and together. I can't flourish if you don't flourish. So the studies coming out of Harvard on flourishing is incredible. There was just like this massive world flourishing study that Harvard and Gallup introduced yesterday. It's incredible. But flourishing then, resilience, positive psychology, growth can only happen if you have that foundational human structure underneath it. So that's why I think all these things make sense with what you're seeing in the organizations today, and really underscores everything as to why those little simple one-on-ones need to happen, and taking time just to understand why someone's overwhelmed or what's causing this overwhelm is at the root of everything.
Well, and I will say that I got to beta read 2 chapters, and it's amazing. I can't wait to read the full book. So I'm super, super jazzed about that. So before we shift gears, like, what is something else when you think about, lifting up and what leaders really just need to be thinking about and taking away? What have you learned that you just most want people to take away from your new book?
The main thing is kind of pulling off of what we were just talking about. That is relational leadership and effectiveness and team development and personal development is all based on relationships. And relationships are based on a lot of little actions. And so I think when I wrote this book, and the last section of the book is a full playbook, like just tips and tools and do this, do this, do this. It is all of those simple things, and also being very cognizant about the lack of time people have, setting it up in a way that it is really quick. Remember, in showing up, we kind of use the marble jar analogy, like any little text, any touch base, anything builds that relational jar. The way I look at it on a business perspective and saying the marble jar, we talk about, putting deposits in the emotional bank account, which I'm sure you use too. But it's such a good visual. Like any good quick one-on-one, it's like putting money in their bank and in their investing in their success. And that to me is, if I can get one thing across, these are not hard things. And everything that we do as a supportive leader should be a series of a lot of small touch points. And that is what builds relationships. It's never long emotional conversations. It's never a long one and then it's done. Just like in your family, with your children, with your husband, with your friends, those relationships are built on many, many small little moments. And that's what we kind of train as well.
Trust is both built and eroded in small moments. It's not the big grand gestures, 100%. Well, and to put the plug up for everyone to go along with the book, there's a supportive leader workshop. You have other workshops that lead into it, right? So there's not just the book, but there's training workshops and a series of facilitators, myself included, who can bring that in, which I think is just so amazing. Like I said, I've seen firsthand with integrating that into the work that we do and being able to be part of your facilitator community and seeing firsthand the benefit. It's just, man, it's needed. And you think, again, I'm going to go back to my one client that's not touchy-feely, but holy cannoli, it resonated deeply. And because a lot of them have kids that age, or it hit them hard and they're like, oh my goodness. So, all right, I know we've asked these questions before, but it's been 2 years. So we're just gonna go there and see if anything's changed. I don't remember what your answers were before, but here we go. So along with your work, right, going back to what are some of those barriers that get in our way of acting, right? So there's the mindset barriers and the behavior barriers. The research that we've done is we know part of what gets in our way of a lot of things is we have this faulty programming or this head trash that hijacks us, right, and gets in the driver's seat. And so, Jen, I would love if you would share what is a self-limiting story, or call it the head trash, if you will, that you still tell yourself sometimes. And when it shows up for you, how do you move beyond it so that you can show up in your life in the way that you want?
Well, that's such an appropriate question, because I will tell you, for the last year I wrote this book, I'm like, is anybody even going to read this book?
You're like, why am I doing this work? Yeah.
And that's true. I mean, that as an author, as a program developer, all the times you're like, why am I even doing this? Right? Like, is there someone with a PhD out there that should be writing this instead of me? And what I come back to is I probably have more experience in this area than most. And if not me, who? Right? But no, it's so true. Like, especially when you are out building your own thing, this better than anyone. That's really where it comes in. And I have to say, though, that having just this honor and privilege of having people like you in my community, just having us all together and the affirmation we get from each other really is what fuels us forward. And so you're such a good example of that.
But I also love, Jen, what you said of if not me, then who? And I think that is something that so many of us, if we're like, well, why should I do this or whatever? It's again, if not you, then who? We can't sit back and wait for someone else that we perceive as quote unquote more qualified to step up. Step up, show up. We all need to show up as leaders. And obviously, this book, for people who have formal leadership roles within organizations, it's even more critical. So I love that. And I love your humanness. So there we go. And the book is going to be a wild success. I know it, because you're amazing. So are you ready for quick questions? We're going to see where we're at today. Hey,
let's see how you can throw me off.
Okay. All right. Fill in the blank. Living authentically is
being open and honest and being able to be embarrassed.
Yeah, 100%. When the world is presenting an opening, but you don't feel like showing up as a leader, what do you do?
I go back to, at this chapter of my life, it's all about making an impact. And I need to consider what kind of legacy I want to leave.
I love it. Do you want to play small, or do you want to leave your legacy? There you go. So what is something that people would be surprised to know about you?
That I am this most earliest riser, and I go to bed so early, it's embarrassing. So seriously, many nights I'm asleep at 8 o'clock, but I'm up at 4. So my wiring has changed over the years. I used to be a night person, but now like it's embarrassing. My kids get mad at me that I don't even answer a text before 8.
That's all right. I'm with you. I've joked for years that I have more senior citizen hours. It's just, we all have our power hours and how we wire and our rhythms.
That's what I love, the early morning, right? Like it's
quiet. No one else is up. I get it. All right. What is your favorite go-to movie?
My favorite go-to movie. Oh boy. Goodness gracious. What was that Jerry Maguire movie? Show Me the Money. That's the one that's coming.
Oh, Jerry Maguire. It was
Yeah. Okay, so that's just coming to the top of my mind because I don't know any other ones. Like I don't know. I'm not good with movies.
It's all right. We got Jerry Maguire. It's all good. What is something you can't live without?
Well, I can't live without my family.
Absolutely. What is something in your ordinary daily life that makes your heart happy?
My iced coffee at 4 a.m.
Is it like, how do you doctor it up? Is it just plain ice or is it flavored? What do you do with your iced coffee at 4 a.m.?
Yeah, I get it from this company near me, and it's called Barry's Brothers, and they're flavored coffees, and I'll vary them around, and I just have a jug in the refrigerator, and I put a little sweetener in and a touch of milk, but mostly black.
Nice. All right. And what are you grateful for right now?
I am grateful for all the people around me, like you, like my family, that are supporting me in this journey, that recognize why this work is needed. This has been a really difficult year with writing a book, changing the company name, website, everything. Like there have been so many challenges this year. And yet I know what we're creating and what we're doing is so good and needed. And so it's the people around me that keep me grounded and motivated and, keep pushing me forward, that I wouldn't be here on this podcast today if it weren't for people like that. So deeply grateful.
Well, we're all here. We're grateful for you because it's amazing. So, all right, closing question, Jen. If you could challenge leaders everywhere to practice this one behavior that would create more human workplaces and equip everyone to show up as a leader, what would that be?
I said it already. Just look everyone in the eye, use their name, say hi, and say, what can I do to support you today? That's it. One question every day to everyone you know, and act on that. And truly, from the bottom of your heart, care about that person. We would transform work overnight.
Oh my God, 100%. Simple but powerful. I love it. Well, Jen, it's always amazing spending time with you. I'm so excited for your book. I'm so excited to keep bringing this work to organizations, and just much, much, much gratitude, my friend.
Thank you, Rosie.
I'm Rosie Ward, and this is Show Up as a Leader. To learn more, head over to PeopleForwardNetwork.com and, of course, hit that follow button.